everybody and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be working on some watercolour paintings that are just going to be so nice and calming for this time of year. So go and grab your painting stuff and join me as I do some paintings. Let's get straight into it. For this first idea, you are going to need a masking fluid and you're going to want to mark out any areas of your trees that you want to remain really bright and white. This will keep the paper from absorbing any watercolour. You need to make sure it's fully dry before you then paint over it. And for mine, I'm using a really small palette of colours. I have got some yellows and oranges and some purpley blues. So I'm thinking about my complementary colours for this one. And you're going to want to start by blocking in any of your shadows first, and then we're going to layer up colours. So just really light layers, allowing them to dry, and then we're going to add and increase the colour of the work. But it's really important that we do allow some of the paints to dry so we don't get that wet in wet bleeding method, because I want to try and avoid that too much in this painting, because sometimes that can look a little bit too muddy or sort of washed out, and it's not really the look I'm going for this painting. For the trees, I'm just blocking in any of the darker tones and thinking about where any snow may not have been able to fall and stick to the tree, and then adding in additional layers of those darker colours just to really intensify those. I then started working on some pattern within the foreground because I wanted to see the texture of the snow coming through, and thinking about areas where it was kind of rippled on the surface. Once I've allowed my paints to dry, I then increase some of the purple tones in the shadows, because I really do want to get a nice contrast between the yellows and those purple tones. So I'm going to add some of those purple tones to the surface in the foreground, so thinking about where some of those shadows may be cast from the snow and that rippled effect, and I'm quite happy with how it's turning out so far. For the trees in the very background, I just use a slightly darker purple over the top of the base layer, and I put the impression in of the shape of the trees. Once everything has dried, I then remove all of that masking fluid to reveal the bright white paint underneath, and then I enhance just a few areas of the trees with a yellow to make it look like that sun is casting and glowing on the snow on the side of those trees. Next up, I'm going to go in with a really simple landscape painting for this one, and I've just blocked in different shapes going across my piece of paper to divide up the landscape. And in each section of the landscape, I'm going to add in a slight variation of either one of my blues or my greens, because those are the colours that I have prepared in my watercolour palette. With this painting, it's really important that you allow each of your sections of paint to dry fully. With some of them, you might be able to paint on to the next section. As you can see with this orange one that I'm now working on, there isn't any paint below or above it, so it won't bleed into another colour. And then you can go back and forth into other sections and really intensify the colours like I am here, and adding in darker colours at the very top of that section. I think this helps to define the sections really well across the landscape. I've chosen the oranges and the blues because I think that they just work really well together, and I like the idea of those really bright winter mornings that cast across and brighten everything up, but we still have those really cool, wintry, frosty looking mornings. In this section, I'm also going to use some sea salt because that can create a really nice texture on your painting. You need to ensure that your painting is quite wet, and then you're just going to sprinkle the salt on top and allow it to dry, and it will work its magic. Whilst it's drying, I'm intensifying any colours in the painting to just really make them stand out, and you can do this a few times until you are happy with the colours in your landscape painting. You can then just remove the salt with your finger, and it leaves this really nice texture on top of your painting. For this last painting, I have been inspired by my drive to work, and recently it has been really quite misty or foggy, and where I live it's very flat and you can just see for miles and miles across the landscape. So I'm trying to get that across in my painting for this one here. So I've added a really light wash to the sky, and I have removed some sections with a piece of tissue to lift out some of the paint. In the very background here, I've added in a tree line in a sort of a light blue grey, and then a second tree line in front of that with a slightly brighter blue, and this helps to define across the two sections of the background of my painting here. With this painting, you're going to have to give quite a lot of drying time because there are some more detailed sections towards the foreground, and you don't want these to blur into your wet paint. So it's really important you allow your background to dry fully before then adding in the trees. On the very back of my horizon line there, I have got the trees that are quite faded in colour, and I've also lifted out some of the lower part of the tree trunk to make that look like it's quite misty along the bottom. And then I'm adding in my ground here, and it's a very light wash before then adding in further trees, and I'm darkening up the colour of these trees because they're a lot closer. They are going to look a lot more detailed and also a lot more vivid in colour. I'm just using blues and browns mixed together for this one because I want this whole piece to have a very cohesive colour, and I wanted to use a very limited palette for this one. And as you may know, I'm a really big fan of using blue in my paintings, and I couldn't resist just using blue as my main colour palette for this one. Let me know in the comments which painting has been your favourite so far and which one you're going to try out. I think my favourite is this one. I had such a good time painting it and it was really calming. For the tree closest to the foreground, I have intensified the colour even further, so it's a lot darker, and I'm just adding in as many details for the branches as I can to make it look nice and full. I'm then going to work on the ground, and I'm just adding in details and then brushing it upwards, and along the front here I brush that in with a dry brush. Next up, I'm going to add this Winsor & Newton Iridescent medium to give my piece a little bit of a shimmer so it looks like a really cold frosty morning. And then this is the end result. You can see how it shimmers there on the tree and in the foreground. I'm really pleased with how it looks. So there you guys have it. Those were my wintry, calming watercolour paintings. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. If you have, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. Also, make sure you subscribe if you're not already subscribed because it does really help out my channel. Let me know in the comments which one of my watercolour paintings you are going to try out, or which one is your favourite, because I'd really like to know. I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye guys.